Welcome to Mission Revive, a podcast dedicated to hope and healing through God's transforming love, where your hosts, anchored in truth and armed with faith, are changing the world and reviving hearts with Jesus, one conversation at a time.
Hi, welcome to this episode of the Mission Revive podcast. I'm Bob Newberry, and I'm a board member of Revive Hope and Healing Ministries, a collection of Catholic apostolates impelled by the Holy Spirit. And my partner for today's podcast is Costa, founder and executive director of Revive Hope and Healing Ministries. Welcome, Ann.
Hi again, Bob. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Well, today we have an acquaintance of a friend of both of ours. She's helped us with a couple of book projects.
Yes.
One of her many talents. We have Ellen Hrkach coming on today. She is an award-winning author and publisher at Quiver Publishing, and she's a mom and a grandma. And she's been active in helping Catholic couples live out their vocation for many, many years with her husband. So I'm glad that she's coming on to explain all the things that she's been involved in. And Ellen, come on and join us and we'll have a chat.
Hello. There she is.
I met you, first of all, I met you at the Catholic Writers Guild conference.
Right.
Many, many years ago. You've been around a while, but
right.
That's been a big part of your life, publishing and writing, right?
You bet.
You bet. Can you talk a little bit about that?
About the writing part of my life? Yes, I can. I started writing when my kids were all small. I have 5 adult sons, and when they were newborn to 11 or 12, I had an experience in front of the Blessed Sacrament in adoration, and I felt called to share my true story of myself and my great-grandmother. And so I wrote my first book. Not an easy project with small kids. I had no experience in writing fiction, but and it took a few years, but that was my first book. And then I got the writing bug and wanted to write books that were not based on a true story. So I just made up characters and whatever, mostly to promote the message that every human being is unique and irreplaceable. And so that flows through all of my books and all of the books that we published through Quiver Publishing. And we did so well in the early 2000 teens that we started taking other authors on and publishing their works too. I think we're up to 45 books that are now published by Quiver Publishing, and I think we have about 23 authors.
Okay. I know personally that you also help authors who were not published through Quiver, right?
Correct.
And I'm one of them. And
Correct.
I so treasure the time working with you. And you use the word we. You're referring to whom?
Oh, my husband.
Yeah, James.
James. Yes, and, he's not here at the moment, but yeah, he's my better half.
Well. And he would say that you're his better half. I know how.
Probably.
I know how you guys work, but you're also involved with the Catholic Writers Guild, but in a position of great responsibility too.
Right? Correct. I was vice president in the early 2000 teens, and then I was president from 2013 to 2016, something like that. Maybe 2015. It's all kind of a blur now.
Okay.
But I've been a member since 2008. I'm one of the first 50 members anyway, and it's just been a joy to be part of the Catholic Writers Guild. And I'm I'm very disappointed that I'm not going to be able to come down. Maybe next year, because I miss all my friends in the guild.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we have a conference every year of Catholic writers um, that come together around. And you're not in our country, you're in Canada, right?
Canada,
So
correct.
that usually takes place here in the United States. Um, can you tell us why it was important to have the Catholic Writers Guild? What does it do? What is it for? Why? Why?
Well, the initial group believed that we needed to have an organization that assisted other Catholic writers because some of us didn't feel comfortable in the Christian writing world. And so we got together and, from 50 or 30 to 50 members, it's grown to, I think it's over 400.
wow.
And I've been a member since 2008. And here it is 2022, so 14 years. And I was to every conference that they ever gave up until 2019 when my grandson was born, and I had to miss that one. And then of course there was COVID, so I had to miss that one. So I was really hoping that I would be able to make it this year, but unfortunately I'm not. But yeah, it's a great organization. Any Catholic writers out there, whether you write nonfiction or whether you write articles or whether you write fiction, and even if you have never written a novel but want to someday, you're still welcome in the guild.
Yeah, I know that a couple of my books got published because I got to go and sit face to face with a traditional publisher, and you get to pitch. You get what, 6 minutes or
It's
something
something like that, yes,
to tell them why they should, what your book is about, why they should publish it, what makes it different, blah 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 blah.
right,
And then if you're lucky and they like it, they'll call you and offer you a contract, which happened to me
correct,
twice through the guild. So
right.
um, yeah, it's a wonderful networking opportunity. Plus, the thing that I like about it, I mean, there is awards. You do there's actual ways in which you give like certification, right, to a certain
Well,
uh
it's seal of approval. We have the
seal of
seal of
approval.
approval, which basically, if you submit your book for the seal of approval, it is evaluated by 3 to 5 evaluators who evaluate the content, the quality, and the Catholic friendliness of the
Mhm.
of the book. And a lot of self-published authors use the SOA just to give their books a bit of a boost.
Yeah,
And I,
great.
we could spend the next few hours talking about writing and publishing and so forth, but that's only a small part of you, isn't it, Ellen? And I listen, based on my knowledge of you, I'm going to go down through a kind of a list, and you can nod yes, and if you nod yes, give us a little bit about that. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, marriage preparation.
Yes. My husband and I have been working in marriage preparation since 1984. We just love helping to form engaged couples to prepare for marriage.
Is that through your parish or
It's through the diocese, but we've also appeared via Zoom through other dioceses throughout Canada and the States.
do
I'm
you
American, so I have a lot of contacts in the States.
do you use an established curriculum, or do
Yes,
you do?
we
Can you?
use the God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage, which is out of Ascension Press. And it's just a beautiful marriage prep program. It's
Okay,
all inclusive. It covers everything.
okay. So I did some quick math. That's almost 40 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Holy smoke!
We've used different programs through all those years, but the last 10 to 12 has been using a theology of the body based curriculum.
Okay, which leads me to my next bullet point here. Um, Theology of the body. You've done some. I think I saw a yes nod there.
Yes.
Uh, okay, can you expand on that?
Yes, well, again, since we've just been married, we have been doing talks to grade 9 and up, sometimes grade 7 and 8. And we talk about the value of the human person, um, theology of the body, which talks about the irreplaceability and the value of each and every human person who is conceived, and it's a very pro-life talk as well, which as we have done these talks, and in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, the young people are becoming more and more vocally pro-abortion, so that when we present them with a small kind of rubber representation of a baby at 12 weeks from conception, we've had young people say that isn't a baby at 12 weeks. It should be just a blob of cells. That's not a blob of cells. And it's like, that's correct. It's not a blob of cells. It is a fully formed baby that just needs to grow. So it's been interesting.
Are you doing that in Catholic schools or public
Yes.
schools? Just
Catholic.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Natural family planning.
Yes, we've been teaching NFP probably since 1983, 84. We had to be trained to teach it, and it basically teaches couples how to avoid and plan pregnancy using a natural method. So it's a method whereby the couple abstain in the fertile time if they're avoiding pregnancy, or they try to, not abstain in their fertile time if they're planning pregnancy.
Okay. All right. Your own family.
5 adult sons, homeschooled for 18 years. Golly, I was one of those mothers who I wasn't so worried about how tidy my house was, and it wasn't filthy, but it was very cluttered. I played with my kids. Now, mind you, at certain stages, I was the same size as my kids, so it kind of made sense. But I enjoyed getting down on the ground and playing with my kids, and I do that with our grandchildren too. And it's funny because a few weeks ago I was with my grandson, and he's almost 3, and he has this small little ball pit, and it's big enough for probably somebody my size, but I mean it's for a little kid. And he asked my husband, "Papa, can you come into the ball pit with me?" And my husband's a regular size 5'7" man. And my husband says, "No, I don't think I can fit." And then he looks at me and he says, "You little Grammy, you can fit in my ball pit." So it's fun playing with kids. And I was given the utmost compliment, I think, when my youngest son was just a baby. A woman that I hadn't met, we met like 6 months later, and she said to me, "I remember seeing you at the park with your 5 kids and thinking to myself, that young mother there," I wasn't that young, "but that mother there really enjoys being a mom." And to me, it was a real compliment, because I did. I mean, there were hard moments. Don't get me wrong. It's hard work, but have fun too. I mean, your kids are only small for a short time, and it's just so wonderful to be able to interact with them and have fun with them.
Yeah. Are you enjoying being a mom and a parent now?
Oh, I do. Yeah, it's interesting because you can have all these interesting conversations with your adult kids.
Yes.
And we have always made it known to them that they can talk about anything to us. Now, we have 1 or 2 of our kids that tell us basically everything, even as adults. And I know that, when they were growing up, we encouraged them to say whatever they wanted to us and never feel like they couldn't tell us anything. So that's what we encourage. And we did encourage our kids to do that. And all of our kids have come to us at moments that were very low for them or difficult for them, and they felt that they were able to talk to us, thankfully. We're not
Yes.
perfect.
Yes.
No
Yes.
married couple is perfect,
Yes.
but we're trying our best to be the best parents we can be.
How about your marriage? Talk about your marriage.
40 years, just celebrated our 40th. Both my husband and I had COVID, and we spent the day lying on the couch watching Columbo. And the TV was hooked up to our um, generator because we had lost power from a big storm. So we
Yes.
couldn't make anything to eat, but we could at least watch TV. And some of our adult kids and their wives came and helped us out and barbecued for us and whatever.
Very
But it
cool.
doesn't, that's
Very,
fine.
very cool. How about, can you talk a little bit about your faith? How important it is to you, how you practice it? How did you come to develop and have the faith that you have? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Um, I'll try to keep it brief, but brevity has never been my strong point. I was brought up in a Catholic family. I went to Catholic school up until 7th grade. My parents stopped going to church, I think after Humanae Vitae. I heard from I had conversations with my mother because they felt that they were contracepting, so they didn't feel they could go to church. And I said, you could have gone to church and just not gone up to communion and gotten a blessing, and I guess at the time they didn't realize it, and there's a whole other story behind why they were using contraception and all that stuff, which is actually in my book, my new book. But my faith was very strong to me until I stopped going to Catholic school. Now, my parents sent me to church every Sunday. My older brother would walk around the corner a couple of times just to say that he had been out, but I always went. I never stopped going to church, but I started being formed more by society and television. So by the time that I met my husband, who was not my husband at the time, he was a faithful Catholic, and of course God knew how to bring me back to him. Because I fell in love with my husband and he brought me back to the faith. And I had never, had gone so far away, but I was pro-choice. I remember thinking I would never have an abortion, but it's not up to me to tell somebody else, the whole politically correct way of being. And so it was through my husband, because our first argument as an engaged couple was whether we were going to use contraception or not, and he was so firmly against using it. And I just thought there's got to be something wrong with him, and yet there wasn't anything wrong with him. There was something wrong with me more so, and I am so thankful that that is how God brought me back to him. Because since then, and it took a year or two to really fully embrace all the teachings of the church, but once I did that, I started becoming the biggest commercial for Catholicism, for theology, the body, for NFP, for any of those things. I was on a train to Toronto one time to go to a book fest, and I sat at the front of the train in these two facing, there were 4 seats altogether facing each other, and I sat in one, and all the people coming on didn't want to sit with me. And at the end, 3 women got on, a medical student, a law student, and another girl who was a university student. And we got into some very interesting conversation about abortion, about waiting until marriage to have sex, about all kinds of wonderful things. And the 4.5 hours just flew. And they said they had never met anybody quite like me. And it's interesting. The way it started was somebody one of the girls said, "Oh, where are you going and who are you visiting?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm a Catholic author and I'm going to a Catholic book fest." "Oh, you're a Catholic author. What did you write?" And then it kind of went from there. So it's pretty cool. And I figure I'm going to have to stand in front of God one day and say, I did everything I could to evangelize those around me. And I never try to miss an opportunity, whether it's the young mothers at the McDonald's play place or on a train or on a plane or wherever. I love talking to people about the Catholic faith.
Well, help me understand then. Anne, you want me to keep going, or is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I have one question, but you go.
Well, your most recent book, Where Angels Pass,
Mhm.
Yes.
That's a fictionalized version
Mhm.
of a real life story.
Correct.
And would you be willing to talk about the real life story part of it?
Of course. Absolutely.
So at the end of the real life story explanation, my question is going to be, in light of that real life story, how has that impacted your faith? Ready, go.
Well, um,
Tell us about the real life story first.
okay, so the real life story is that my father was abused by his freshman year in high school teacher.
Right.
Um,
Who was a priest.
yes, correct. And he never told anybody except for my mother. And he kept it bottled inside. And he eventually, he kind of fell away from his faith when he joined the Marines, and then he joined the Army. Because there are girls in every ports and that sort of thing. But when he came home, he knew he wanted to settle down and practice his faith and come back to his faith. And he met my mother, and so she knew about it, but she didn't, I guess, she didn't realize how much of an impact it had on my father's life. My father was small, like myself. I got my short stature from him. My mother's actually tall, which is strange. My mom was 5'6", 5'7", and she would always. We'd be doing dishes at the sink, and she'd always say, "Are you standing in a hole?" She always
Yeah.
teased me about that.
Yeah.
But she's a very strong woman. When I was 2, his father passed away, and he was very close with his father. He never told his father about the abuse, but he was very close with his father. And that, combined with the difficulties and the stuff that he went through as a kid and stuff at work, that whole work chapter that is in there was written from my father's notes on that. He kept notes. So a lot of the stuff is actually based on the truth. And anytime that Evie, who's my character, and Hank, the father, interact, a lot of those conversations actually took place. But yeah, when I was 2 and when my mother was pregnant with my youngest brother, my dad had a psychotic break, and he didn't know where he was. He didn't recognize his kids. He recognized his mother. He recognized my aunt and my uncle, but he didn't recognize the kids. And actually throughout his entire stay at the psychiatric hospital, he didn't even remember he had kids until about 4 or 5 months into his treatment. And I know that when I actually remember, I have a very good memory. And I was only 2, but I remember feeling safe that I was, in my father's lap. And, even though he didn't realize who I was, I still felt safe, Eventually that led to, he got out. Nobody would offer him a job. So he had to get, the lowest paying things because nobody was very pro mental health back then. You had a nervous breakdown, we don't want to hire you.
Right.
He finally did get a job with the post office, praise be to God. But that job came with a lot of stresses, and he eventually started drinking to excess and became an alcoholic, and then he died very suddenly. And we didn't find out until after that I didn't find out from my mom until well after my father died. And my first thought was, and I was a faithful Catholic at the time because it was after I was married. And my first thought was, I hope that priest is burning in hell. And I know that it's a natural inclination to think that, but when I talked to my spiritual director, he said, your anger is justified, but we are all called to forgive. And you can only start healing once you have forgiven this priest for what he did to your father. And so it was not overnight, but I did things like I started fasting for this priest because he was deceased by this point. That is not true. In the book, I have Evie confronting the priest. That was made up. That's what I would have said to the priest had I had the opportunity, but he was already gone by the time I found out. And basically, I just worked through forgiving him. Now, other members of our family do not want to forgive our father's abuser. Mainly because they said he basically ruined our father's life. And that is probably partly true. He did. My father was a very sensitive young man, and he reminds me very much, one of my sons reminds me very much of my dad in that way. And I can just picture that son being abused and not being able to tell anybody and holding it in. And I can't even, I don't want to imagine it. And so, for me to be able to move on and heal, I knew I had to forgive him. And, I do forgive him. That doesn't mean that I don't want God's justice. That doesn't mean that I like what he did. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means I've forgiven him and there's peace in my soul to the point where I can watch something on the television about the abuse scandal and not tense, right? I mean, I used to really tense because as a close relative of an abuse victim,
Right.
We are in many respects victims as well.
Yes.
We had to suffer all the consequences of a father who had a nervous breakdown and who was an alcoholic, and
Sure.
at many times I had to be the parent to my father because he was in a drunken stupor. And thankfully, thank God for small favors. My father wasn't a violent drunk; he was a happy drunk, and so that's. At least he was never violent. And he was absolutely a wonderful father. He wasn't perfect by any means, but when I started writing the book 15 years ago, I couldn't write it because it was still raw. It had been 20 some years, but it was still raw. And I only started writing it after the McCarrick scandal. Because I really felt that the world needed to know that not all abuse victims, like my father and myself, leave the Catholic Church, because the Church, I'm not going to leave the true presence of Christ, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and the Eucharist and the true teachings of the Catholic faith, because there are many priests who are abusing boys and others who are allowing it. Yes, that's wrong and it's horrible and it needs to change, but that's not the church.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I'll have to I have to tell you that as I don't typically fly through books, but I'll tell you, as I'm going through Where Angels Pass, my goal was to have it completed by the time we talk today. Can't do it. It's a hard book to read, and
Oh, for sure.
I am so taken by how you slowly engaged me, the reader, in becoming familiar with these characters, and it's just masterful. But it's and so I'm thinking that, you know, to my knowledge, I don't know anybody personally that was victimized, has been victimized, is a family member of somebody who's been victimized. To my knowledge, I don't know people that fit that category. But your book is invaluable in educating people like me about the horrific tragedy of what has taken place, you know?
Well, I'm amazed after I wrote the book, how many people came up to me just locally, right? And I've gotten emails as well, but how many people came up to tell me, thank you. I was also abused by a priest. And, you know, I say, I am so sorry that you had to go through that. And what really touched my heart was that many of these people have said, you really captured the angst and the anxiety and the grief of the victim well. And I was never a first class abuse victim just through my father in terms of that he was abused. But, you know, it's really important that our world, our Catholic Church, understand, our priests. I mean, you know, they need to understand that this is not an issue that will be allowed anymore. And I know it's still out there and I know it still exists, but I'm praying, you know, I pray every day for victims of clergy abuse and sexual abuse of any kind. I pray for our church. I pray for bishops to be faithful. And I know it's going to change. And we just needed the light to be turned on so we can see all the bugs going. I know that's what they say, when you turn the light on, then you see them all. And I'm glad that the light has been turned on. But after, you know, in 2018, after that summer, I really felt tormented, like, okay, I need to write this book. And so I actually waited 2 years to do it. And I only actually started last summer, the beginning of last summer. And in 3 weeks, I actually had the first draft of the book written. I've never written a book that fast.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. It was
So-
time. It was definitely time. It was time for you to have that out there. What's the name of the book again, Ellen?
Where Angels Pass.
And how can people get a copy of that?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's available through Kindle.
Okay.
You know, it's just type in Where Angels Pass, Ellen Gable, and it'll bring you to several websites if you want to purchase it.
Great.
The-
Ellen Gable. Okay.
The title is eerie to me because the name of the school of the main character
Right.
in the book is something angels. Can you help me?
Holy Archangels High, yes. That's not the real name of the school. I didn't
Yeah.
want to say the real name of the
Yes,
school.
yes, but it's still eerie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And in many respects, my husband said to me, you, in many respects, were also an angel, an assistant to your father, in life and even in death. Out of the 4 kids, I could never say no to my dad. I mean, except if he was asking me to get him a beer, then
Yeah.
I could say no to him then. But when he was on the wagon, he liked to talk. And so I would sit on the edge of his bed and we'd just talk about all kinds of things. And I remember those conversations, and I really treasure them
What a
because,
treasure. Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
I can't go back there, but I can remember them in my heart. He really struggled. He really struggled to be a good Catholic. He really struggled to be a good father and a good husband. Was he always good in those areas? Sometimes he lapsed, but we're all human. And, it's our end goal is heaven. And I know that what really hurt me was after somebody read my first book, and I didn't go into all the details when the father dies in my first book, but somebody wrote me an email and said, you can't be thinking your father is in heaven. He was in a state of mortal sin. He's going to hell. Now, I have always believed in God's mercy. And I say the Divine Mercy Chaplet every single day for those who are dying, who have died. And I truly believe, I don't know if this is Catholic teaching, but I truly believe at that moment of death, you get to choose life and good or choose evil. And I think even some people who have had a very not good life and made a lot of bad choices can still choose good. And so my father was buried with a Catholic ceremony, a Catholic funeral mass. So it wasn't like they wouldn't marry him and all, So, and I think people have to remember we need to be merciful in our own lives, merciful to others. And the forgiveness thing, people have said, you're better than I am. No, we all are human beings with concupiscence. Like we have this tendency to sin, right?
Yeah.
And so we need the grace of God. We need the grace of the sacraments. We need the Eucharist. We need a prayer life. We need to read scripture. We need all of those things. And without them, we don't have the graces. We just have to ask for the graces and keep our souls open to the graces. And we can all do it. We can all forgive in the most, can forgive the most horrible, horrible things.
Yes. By God's grace. We can't do it on our
Amen.
own. Yeah.
Amen.
Right. Right. And no one knows the state of anybody else's soul. So for anybody to be able to
Absolutely.
say that, they really can't say that. That is Catholic teaching. We're not allowed to make those kind of judgments on somebody's
Absolutely.
soul. So that, and my goodness, we don't have any clue. I mean, you didn't know what your burdens your father was carrying, right? Until afterwards, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, wow, that must have been something. And Bob's question was, how did that affect your faith? Did it affect your faith at any level when you found that out?
Oh yeah. In the beginning, because in the book I tell about my brother's friend was approached by the priest of that parish down where we lived in New Jersey. And he punched the priest in the face and gave the priest a black eye. And I remember thinking, well, those priests who do that are few and far between. And then of course 2001 came, and the 2002 and the Boston Globe story just lit up about the priest sex abuse, and then 2018. And it did affect my faith in the sense that I was so disappointed in people who maybe suspected something was going on, and rather than do anything, swept it under the rug or moved the priest or whatever. In my father's case, that particular teacher was known by the upperclassmen to prey on young boys. And my question to my mother was talking to her brother, who was 2 years older than my father, and why didn't you tell the kids? Why didn't you warn them? And I guess back then nobody said anything.
That
They
is so
knew,
true.
but they just, which, you know,
If anything has come of this, is that we won't be there again in a place where we won't say anything because the
amen.
shame or the cover is blown for
Right.
that, you know. Hopefully, I mean, that's what we're praying for. We want the lead of light and light, the darkness to be brought into the light,
Amen.
because it was a conspiracy of silence all the way
That's right.
around.
That's right.
It was just something, it was just, was talking about to somebody about, it was just the culture. We all knew the ones that were doing stuff that were kind of funny, that we didn't like who we were around. Everybody just kind of knew it, but nobody said anything.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Very sad. But on a positive note, hopefully
Yes.
things will begin to change. And I can see that things are already changing. You know, I don't think there's as many people that will be silent.
Right.
And I know my kids, and we always had conversations from the time they were very young. You know, if anything happens to you, if anybody touches you in an inappropriate way, don't listen to them. It doesn't matter what they say. You tell us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I don't think parents, you know, and I'm not criticizing parents. There were many great parents, and my grandparents were good parents, but they wouldn't have believed it. You know, my grandfather may have. I know my grandmother wouldn't have. My grandmother was the disciplinarian in that family. And my father and they would laugh about, you know, when he was being tied to a chair after he stole he shoplifted some candy, and he was tied to the chair and beaten with an egg beater, and he was 10 or 12 or whatever he was. And I would be like wide-eyed, like, what? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Different
But
time.
yeah,
Different time. Yeah. Well, Ellen, thank you so much. You know, and you have not disappointed. And I would say you've even grown a couple inches, you know.
thank you. I appreciate
but,
that.
yeah. Would you be willing to come back at some point in the future and talk
Oh,
about
anytime,
any new projects you're involved with, or?
anytime. And James can be with me next time as well. He's funnier than I am. He was a teacher at the high school for 26 years, so he's really well spoken, and he's funny, and he's probably more entertaining than I am.
Well, and I find that hard to believe, but he is pretty unique character. Yes,
He
I
is.
agree. Yeah. And anything
No,
I
it's
know the
just
clock is ticking here.
it's been wonderful to just hear about your life experience and just hear the conviction in your voice when you said that, you know, whatever happened, I'm not leaving the church. I'm my faith. You know, why would you? Why would you let one person do, you know, take you away from the grace and the beauty that is our beautiful faith? So, and
Yeah.
your books are always so beautiful in terms of helping people to understand their own beauty and through the eyes and the lens of our faith. So thank you so much for that. And people should just look up her books. Is it Ellen Gable, right?
Right. And I mean, you
Okay.
could just go into Amazon.com and
So many books you've written.
Ellen Gable, and it'll come up to I've now written 12 books, and
Yes.
trying
Very
to write a
wholesome.
13th, but you know, it's you know, you have to get started, and then it comes. But I'm enjoying the grandkids, and we've had 2 weddings this year. Well, we have a wedding coming up, and we had a wedding in April, so we'll have 3 married sons. And it's just so fun how the family just grows and grows, and we are enjoying this time in our lives, and really enjoying the grandkids.
Yeah,
That's
the crown of
thrilling.
glory.
That's
Amen.
thrilling. Thank you so much,
Thank
Ellen.
you.
Oh,
We'll
thank
talk,
you. You
we'll
guys
talk to you
take
again.
care.
You bet. Bye-bye.
We are grateful that you joined us today for another episode of the Mission Revive podcast. We humbly ask for your prayers as we continue in the mission entrusted to us to evangelize and revive hearts with Jesus. We would also ask that you prayerfully consider becoming a sponsor of this podcast or making a financial contribution to support this growing ministry. You can do this by visiting our website at revivehopeandhealing.com or through our Revive Hope and Healing Ministries patron page. We cannot do this without you. Thank you.